The late morning sunlight poured through the glass windows of La Moravia, one of the most luxurious restaurants in the city, turning every polished surface into a quiet reflection of gold. The clinking of cutlery and the soft murmur of wealthy patrons filled the air, but everything shifted the moment Aurelio Santoro walked in. He was a billionaire known for his ruthless business decisions, his cold presence, and his belief that money could bend anyone. As he entered, heads turned, and even the waitstaff straightened nervously, whispering with concern. Aurelio moved with an air of superiority, his expensive suit catching the sunlight as if demanding attention. But none of the staff suspected that by the end of this daylight afternoon, the man would be humbled in a way he had never imagined, and the person responsible would be someone he didn't think twice about when he first saw her. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the power of simple humanity, then please like, comment, share, and subscribe to our channel. And before we continue, tell us in the comments where you're watching from. We always love to see our community around the world. At the far end of the restaurant stood Marcela Rios, a young waitress in her early 20s. She moved with quiet grace, her dark hair tied back neatly, her uniform crisp despite the long morning rush. Her eyes carried a calm determination, the kind born from years of carrying more weight than someone her age should. Marcela wasn't there only for a job. She was supporting her younger brother, helping her mother pay medical bills, and trying to save for a future that still felt uncertain. She had learned early that dignity wasn't defined by wealth, and pride came from how one endured struggles, not from how loudly one displayed success. She approached Aurelio's table, because it was assigned to her station, unaware that the single interaction would reopen wounds she had spent years trying to heal. Aurelio didn't bother looking at the menu. He leaned back in his chair, assessing Marcela with a gaze that felt more like judgment than observation. With a dismissive wave, he spoke loudly in Spanish, mocking, arrogant, as though she were beneath him, as though he assumed she didn't understand a word. His words weren't just insulting, they were belittling, reducing her to someone he believed had no value beyond serving a plate. To him, Spanish was a private language he used to ridicule others without consequence. Several nearby diners turned their heads, some pretending not to hear, others exchanging uncomfortable glances. Marcela's hands tightened around her notepad. Though she understood every word, she kept her composure. Years of hardship had taught her that reacting immediately wasn't always strength. Sometimes, strength was waiting for the right moment for truth to speak. Spanish had been her first language, but life had pulled her far from the communities where it was common. She learned English quickly to help her mother navigate hospitals, workplaces, and a world that rarely waited for people like them. But she never forgot who she was or the language that held her childhood, her sorrows, and her hope. Aurelio continued speaking with sharp disrespect, making assumptions about her intelligence, upbringing, and worth. It wasn't only rude, it was personal, hitting wounds she carried silently. Marcela stepped forward and responded in perfect, fluent Spanish, respectful, steady, and unshaken. Her voice was so calm and clear that the entire table behind Aurelio fell silent. Conversations around them softened as more diners turned to watch. Aurelio froze mid-gesture, shock spreading across his face. The arrogance shattered instantly, replaced with disbelief and embarrassment. He expected ignorance, but instead, he was met with articulation, confidence, and dignity far greater than his own. For the first time in a very long time, perhaps ever, someone spoke to him in a way that pierced straight through the armor of money and pride he had built around himself. Marcela didn't raise her voice. She didn't insult him. She simply reminded him, through her poise and fluency, that respect was not optional. She represented something he had forgotten, that humanity is universal, that worth isn't determined by wealth, and that every person carries a story far deeper than what can be seen at a glance. Aurelio felt his chest sink with shame, the kind that comes when a lifetime of unchecked arrogance is reflected back with quiet truth. As Marcela walked away to place his order, whispers of admiration spread among diners. Some nodded at her, others smiled gently. A few looked at Aurelio with visible disappointment, silently urging him to reconsider the man he had become. Aurelio sat there, unable to regain the dominance he entered with. He watched her move through the restaurant with the grace that made his earlier behavior feel even more childish. Something inside him cracked, not from humiliation alone, but from a realization he didn't expect. He had been raised speaking Spanish too. Hearing her voice reminded him of days spent with his grandmother in a small village, long before wealth consumed his identity. As he ate the meal she later delivered, he felt guilt dissolving through him. He watched her wipe tables with tireless dedication, help an elderly couple with patience, guide a nervous young server with kindness. It struck him deeply that the woman he mocked carried more strength in her quiet resilience than he ever had in his empire of luxury. After years of abandoning humility, this encounter forced him to face a version of himself he no longer recognized. And for the first time in years, he wanted to change, not because he'd been caught, but because something inside him awakened. A memory of who he used to be, before money made him smaller instead of bigger. If this story has touched your heart so far, please like the video, share it with someone who believes in kindness, and subscribe to support more meaningful stories. Before the ending, tell us in the comments, what would you have done if you were in Marcella's place? Aurelio stood before leaving and walked to where Marcella was cleaning. In a soft voice, one trembling with sincerity, he apologized in Spanish. Not for appearances, not for reputation, but because he finally understood the weight of his actions. Marcella looked into his eyes, saw the genuine regret, and offered a respectful nod. Forgiveness didn't erase what happened, but it allowed something new to begin. Aurelio left that afternoon humbled, carrying a lesson that no amount of wealth could have purchased. And Marcella continued her shift with the quiet pride of someone who, without raising her voice, reminded a powerful man what true strength looked like.